question about what kind of God would allow only one way. We live in a culture that prizes tolerance as a great virtue, and in view of that particularly, the Christian message seems to be incredibly intolerant, doesn't it? Petty and exclusive. How could God say that there was only one way to him? And yet that appears to be the Christian claim, doesn't it? That Jesus is the only way, the only truth, the only life. How exclusive, how petty, how intolerant. It might have been popular to say that 200 years ago, for instance, when most people living in Britain would have considered themselves Christian and would have had little contact with those who were not Christian. But in a multicultural society, how can you continue to make that kind of claim? I grew up in Leicester, in the middle of England, and Leicester is the first city in Britain to have an ethnic majority. And that is more people that are not from a British background than from a British background. And wonderfully in Leicester, that's a great thing. There's diversity and there's real harmony between ethnic groups. But of course that means that there are all sorts of religious backgrounds represented in Leicester. I was in a school where as a Christian I was very much in the minority. And so in that kind of environment, where you have people with all sorts of faith backgrounds and none, how can you claim that Jesus is the only way? I was in Bath recently, just before Christmas, and one of the students was saying to me, look, I accept everyone, no matter who they are or what they claim to believe. Why can't God just accept everyone? Why does God have to be so intolerant? So it's a really huge issue. And maybe you're here because you think that on this issue particularly, Christianity seems intolerant, and that's one of the reasons why you want to reject it. Or maybe you're intrigued by the claims of Jesus or the Christians that you've met, but you think, how could I ever sign up to something that is so exclusive? And if I was to claim to be a Christian, would that mean that I have to claim to be better than everyone else and that I am right and they're wrong? Because most of us don't want to make those kind of statements, do we? So it's very popular, as I said, in our society to say it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what your faith is, it doesn't matter what your ideas about truth are, they're all equally valid. And if you want to get there, one day you'll get to God, whichever path you choose. Now that's very popular, but actually, just to start with, I want to ask 4 questions, or help us to think in 4 ways about that belief. Firstly, to ask the question, what is the evidence for that belief? You may say, well, it's not a belief, it's just my idea. But actually it is a belief, isn't it? When you say all religions get to God, or all religions are true, that in itself is a system of belief. And it's certainly not a universal one. There are lots of people in the world that wouldn't agree with this. They would say, no, that's not right at all. So what makes you think, of course, that you're right and they're not? Here's the second problem. It can really ignore the differences between beliefs. It's popular to say that religions are fundamentally the same and only superficially different. But actually, when you start to look at them in any detail, you realise that they're only superficially the same and they're fundamentally different. You only need to do religious education at school for a couple of years to discover that, on the very basic questions of God. Does God exist even? Religions disagree. So to say they're all the same and they all believe the same things, does that really work? But of course, if you did do religious education at school like I did, your religious education teacher may have come out with the illustration of the elephant. Have you heard of the illustration of the elephants? Most people have. It comes out at some point. And the illustration goes like this. There's an elephant and there's a load of blind men. It's not very nice to blind men, I have to say, because these blind men are trying to feel an elephant, an occupation which I think probably has certain hazards. And one of them feels its side and thinks it's a brick wall, one of them feels its leg and thinks it's a tree trunk, one of them feels its tail and thinks it's a rope, and we'll stop at the body parts. But they're all feeling the elephant. So the illustration is to say, that's like religion. It's all grasping at ultimate reality, and we're all coming to different conclusions. So we're all very, very different, but actually it's all really the same thing. Now there's at least a couple of problems with the illustration. Firstly, it's quite an arrogant illustration, isn't it? How do I mean? Well, who is it that can see the elephants? It's the person giving the illustration, aren't they? They're the ones saying, I can see what everyone else can't. So they're saying, basically, all the religious people of the world are kind of blind people groping at reality, but I have seen ultimate reality. I've seen the big picture. And that's a very big claim to make, isn't it? Secondly, the problem with the illustration is that they weren't all right. They were all wrong, weren't they? They're all barking up the wrong tree, or the wrong elephant, you might say. Sorry, it's very cheesy. But they'd all got the wrong end of the stick. I mean, it wasn't a tree or a rope, it was an elephant. So that's the second problem. We can ignore the differences between religions. Sorry, there's the elephants. Thirdly, tolerance presupposes that we disagree with people. Tolerance is prized in our society, and I'm not speaking against tolerance. I think there is a great thing in our society that we are tolerant of people of different beliefs. But tolerance presupposes that you disagree, doesn't it? If you agree with someone 100%, you don't tolerate them, you agree with them. If you disagree with someone, you have to tolerate them. And toleration means that you maybe disagree with them, but you allow them the dignity and right to hold their beliefs even though you don't hold them yourself. And I would say that's absolutely right. We want to live in a culture where people have the right to hold beliefs, even that we might disagree with, but we give them the right to do so. And it should work the other way too. And then fourthly, I'd say you can't get away from exclusivity no matter how hard you try. Can't get away from exclusivity. Actually, did you know your university is an exclusive establishment? You know that? They didn't let anybody into Glasgow University. Well, look at some of you, I'm not sure how you got it. No, that would be cool, wouldn't it? But they didn't. You had to take exams, you had to pass, and you needed to meet requirements. It's an exclusive establishment. And exclusivity is in all forms of life. And when it comes to religion, I want to suggest exclusivity is there no matter what you believe. So there are really four views about religion that you could have. Here they are. You could say all religions are right. You could say some religions are right. You could say one of them is right. Or you could say none of them are right. Okay? Four views about religion. Now most people say, how arrogant is view number 3? How can you say that there is only one right religion? But actually, have you ever thought about it? If you say that all religions are right, you're disagreeing with the people who say that some of them, one of them, and none of them are right. If you say that some of them are right, you're disagreeing with the people who say that all of them, one of them, and none of them are right, and so on. You can get the idea, don't you? I mean, whatever you think about religion, you're basically going to have to disagree with someone. It's going to be very hard to hold a belief about anything in reality without disagreeing with someone at some points. It's the nature of truth, isn't it? That it's exclusive. So you can't get away from exclusivity, no matter how hard you try. So what should we do in that sense? If this is the case, I guess there's 3 options, aren't there? Option number 1 is you can just give up and become agnostic about religion and belief. You can just say, well, there's no way I can ever know anything about it, it's just too confusing, I'll give up. But hopefully what you've seen or heard this week, if you've been to anything more this week, is that these things are really important. If they were true, and if the Christian claim is true in particular, these things would have massive implications. So simply apathetically not even bothering to check it out would be, I think, a big mistake. Second option is to say, okay, what I need to do is I need to check out every religious claim that's ever been made in the world, anywhere. I'll weigh them all up, examine them in detail, and make up my mind which one I'm going to follow, if any. Now the problem with that, of course, is that could take quite a long time. I mean, you'd be travelling around the world and studying religions until the day you die, and you probably wouldn't get to the end of them. Now, it's not that I'm against you doing that. If Christianity is worth believing, I think it should stand up comparatively to other religious claims. It's not that we want to hide other ideas for the sake that they might seem better, but it is practical in many ways to think that you're going to be able to study everything before you can make any decision. So option number 3 is this. Option number 3 is you start with Christianity. Now you're thinking, of course you're going to say that, you're a Christian, speaking for the Christian Union. Well, of course I would, wouldn't I? But I want to just give you 3 reasons why I think that that's actually a good place to start. Okay? And the first reason is this. Why study the claims of Christianity? Firstly, because it's unique in the way you can investigate it. Now what do I mean by that? How do you know whether a religious belief or philosophy is true? It's one of the big questions we've been thinking about this week. How do you know whether something is true? And one of the difficulties you have when it comes to religion and philosophy is that's a very hard question to ask. Because, well, it's very hard to show whether many religious claims are true. See, many religious claims are basically philosophies about life and sets of moral teaching about how to live. And how do you show whether they're true or not? I guess pragmatically you could say it works for me. I guess, emotionally you could say I feel it's nice or it's good. But objectively to say it's true is really difficult because, well, there isn't any way of falsifying that idea or philosophy. It's not objective in that sense. You can take it or leave it. I mean, take for instance the claims of Buddhism. How would you know whether Buddhism is true? You can say, well, I like the teaching of Buddhism, or I don't like it. But whether or not the Buddha existed didn't actually change whether Buddhism as a system might work for you or not, because it's a philosophy. You might say the same for the claims of Islam. How would you objectively verify or falsify the claim that Muhammad really did receive the words of Allah as the Quran in a cave? Because it's very difficult to try and verify that claim. No one else was there. But at the heart of Christianity is something quite different. Christianity is not just a philosophy or a set of moral teaching. It's centred on a person. I mean, the clue is really in the name, isn't it? Christianity is about Christ. One person said if you take Christ out of Christian, you're left with 3 letters, I, A, N, and Ian can't help you. That's a very bad joke, so I won't use that one. But it is about Jesus Christ. Not just his teaching, but his person, what he did, his claims about himself, his life, death, and, crucially, his resurrection. The whole of the New Testament says that that is the thing that undergirds the foundation stone of Christianity. And it either happened or it didn't. But it is something you can investigate. Which means that actually there is a difference in the way you can investigate a Christian claim, I would say, than many, many other religions. And someone put it in a diagram in this way. They said, this is in some way how religions often start. People have a dream about God, an encounter with God, or an idea about God, and they tell everybody the dream, the encounter, the idea they had. Here's how Christianity starts. After a public ministry, Christ was killed publicly. Christ rose publicly from the grave. He publicly showed himself to the public, and then the public told everyone else what they saw. It's a very different kind of nature. Sorry if you can't see it, I'm just in the way a little bit, aren't I? It's very different in its nature. It's a public event, something that people would have seen at the time. And would have been able to investigate. And you can investigate it too. That's why on Friday night we're going to look at the claim of the resurrection in detail, looking at what the evidence is and whether you can be convinced by it. So it's unique in the way you can investigate it. But here's the second thing. It's unique in what it claims. In particular, what it claims about its founder. You see, some religions claim that their founder was a prophet. Others that they were inspired or enlightened people. But Jesus' claims about himself were in one sense incredibly egotistical, because he claimed not just to be a prophet or to be wise and inspired, but he actually made claims which, once you've looked at them, you would think only God could really make. He claimed to forgive people's sin, something which offended religious leaders because they knew that was the kind of thing that only God could do. He claimed that he and God the Father were one and the same, that if you had met him, you had met God. He took the name of God from the Old Testament, the I Am, and he applied it repeatedly to himself. His claims were egocentric, they centred on him. Now, of course, you might say anyone can make those kind of claims. Well, sure, I could make those kind of claims. I could walk down the street this afternoon with a big billboard on me saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to God but through me, and you'd all think I was an idiot, and I would be. Okay? But that's not normally what people think of Jesus. It's not normally the category they put him in. And not only does he make those kind of claims, but he also does the kind of things that only God could do. He has authority over sickness, over evil, over nature, over death itself, vindicating and verifying the things that he says. And if that's true, then actually what is true of Jesus is different to any other person or any other religious leader. He's not just claiming to be a prophet. He's claiming to speak with a greater authority than that. So listening to what Jesus says, well, it would be really important, wouldn't it, if that was true? So that's the second reason. And here's the third reason. Investigate the claims of Christianity because it's unique in what it offers. See, many of us basically kind of feel, even if we're not religious, but we know how religion often works. Religion says, here's a way of living, here's a system of behaviour, here's a teaching, here are some rituals. Follow these rituals, live like this, and you'll be okay. You'll either be reincarnated to something better, you'll go to paradise, to heaven, whatever, but that's the way to live. And if you don't, then you'll not be okay. Basically, someone said religion is spelled a two-letter word, D-O. It's what you do that really counts. But even if you're not religious, you might say, well, there could be, and especially maybe if you're not religious, you might say there's a problem with that. Or two problems. Firstly, if my acceptance with God or the higher power is dependent on what I do, then if I feel I am accepted, it's because I've done enough, right? So basically I'm going to be tempted to be proud. I am accepted because I'm good, and you're not accepted because you're not. I'll be tempted to feel proud. Or I have the opposite problem of thinking, well, I might look at my life and say, well, I'm not good enough, I haven't done enough, I'm not the person I should be, and therefore God doesn't accept me. I'm going to be depressed and despairing because there's no hope for me. So I'm going to be proud because I'm better and I'm good and I'm in, or I'm going to be depressed because I'm bad and I'm not. Either way, I'm going to be a bit of a pain in the neck to most people, aren't I? We're wary of that idea. But Christianity is not spelt D-O. It's not about what we do. In one sense, you can spell Christianity a four-letter word, D-O-N-E. It's about what God has done. Because the Bible is not a story about what we must do for God, but the Bible is a story about what God has done for us. In particular, in the person of Jesus, as he comes and lives the life we should have lived, but so often don't. And then dies the death we should have died, taking our place, the punishment we deserve for the way we've lived and treated God and others, offering us forgiveness that we don't deserve. You see, the relationship with God that is offered in Christianity is not the reward that we get for a life lived in religious obedience, but it's a gift received because God has already paid the price in Jesus himself. Another word that the Bible actually uses to describe this idea is the word grace, God's undeserved favour. And I was listening to a U2 song a while back, an old one now, called Grace, and in it has this line that grace walks outside of karma. Karma, the idea we get what we deserve, but in Christianity we get what we don't deserve. We get God's acceptance because of what Jesus has done. In fact, I was listening to an interview with Bono a while back, and he said this: I'd be in trouble if karma was going to be my judge. It doesn't excuse my mistakes, but I'm holding out for grace. I'm holding out that Jesus took my sins onto the cross, because I know who I am, and I hope I don't have to depend on my own religiosity. See, that is what Christianity offers. Not a system of behaviour that you must live up to, but the gift of forgiveness that anyone can have. Which, by the way, means that coming to know Jesus Christ doesn't mean that we have to become proud and claim we're better than everyone else. Actually, it involves taking the humbling step of accepting we're not better than anyone else, and that we're not good enough, and that we do need forgiveness. In fact, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people find it hard to consider Christianity, because it requires humility. Because whilst Christians can accept they're not who they should be, and they can't earn God's acceptance, they can know that they have God's acceptance because of Jesus. And so they know they're accepted, not might be accepted one day if they're good enough, but are accepted now because of what Jesus has done. It's liberating, it's joyful, it's wonderful. And so it should transform people for the better. You know, if you think that becoming a Christian would be making you into some kind of narrow, exclusive, petty, judgmental kind of person, well, actually, if this is what it's all about, I don't think that should happen. I don't think that does happen. Often it's a stereotype that's not borne out in reality. I've got a mate back in Bournemouth, we often talk, he's an atheist, and we talk about God and Christianity, and once he said to me, he said, Christians are so arrogant, they're so proud. And so I said to him, I said, well, I'm a Christian, do you think I'm like that? And he said no, and I thought, well, he had to say that because I was buying the dinner. So then I said to him, well, your wife, she's a Christian, do you think she's like that? And he said, no. And I thought, well, he had to say that too, because I'd have told her. And then I said, look, here are some people you know, and I listed a few, they're all Christians, do you think they're like that? And he said, no. I said, have any of the Christians you've met in Bournemouth been like that? And he said, no. And I said, so why have you judged Christianity on this presupposition that wasn't borne out by the reality of your experience? We often have an idea of what it would be like to be a Christian, but actually it's not always what Christianity is really like. If that's what you think it's like, well, check out what Christians are really like. There's lots here, you can check them out, you know, not just the good looking ones, you can check any of them out, and you can find out what difference it makes. And this is not exclusive either, in the sense that it's just for white, Western, middle-class people. This offer of forgiveness is for the world, Jesus says. And actually the reality is, around the world today, there are millions of people who've come to discover that. So I'm going to invite my friend now to come up, Gak, and he's going to share very, very briefly his story about how he came to discover this gift from a very different background to my own. Watch the wine.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gak. I'm not from Scotland, which is obvious. I'm from Thailand. So, being born as a Thai person, I was given a Thai nationality, and I automatically became a Buddhist because of the Buddhist country. So I grew up in a Buddhist family. So I practice kind of 5 basic precepts for Buddhists. So I kept on doing that. So most of the time I failed. I had to confess that. Until I went to a university, the first year, I was invited by a friend to a kind of a Christian event, which is more or less similar to the CU are doing just now. So I went to the event, and then a guy said that Jesus is the only way, the only truth, and the only life. So no one could be accepted by God except through him. So my immediate response was that this guy must be crazy or just insane. So how would that be? But at that time I was thinking there is no use for me to just give a try. So this guy, might be crazy like what I thought, or in the same time he must know the personal God, must know Jesus personally. That's why he boldly said something like that. So I decided to go to a Bible study to read story of Jesus, teaching of Jesus in the Gospel. So just give a try, and then I just found out that his teaching is he's full of authority, and Jesus can forgive me my sin. So thinking back about my Buddhist life, it doesn't mean that Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist teaching is something not good. The teaching is good, but the problem is about myself, so I can't just do it. So I can't be sinless by my own ability, so I need the forgiveness from Jesus. So I was thinking, imagine I was in Titanic, and then the Titanic is sinking down, and it was in the sea, very cold. I was swimming, trying to survive myself. So my Buddhist friend might come beside me and teach me how to swim. He tries to help me, show me how to swim. But it's not like that. So I do know how to swim, but I can't be there too long because it's just too cold and I just can't do it. But Jesus is different. Jesus jumps into the sea, he holds me up. He gives me the life jacket, he brings me to the lifeboat, and he brings me back home. So Jesus to me is a person of God. It's not really about religion, but it's about personal relationship, knowing Jesus as a savior. So that I decided to follow him. Thank you very much.
Jack's going to be around at the end, so if you want to talk to him more about that, I'm sure he'd love to share more about how he found that discovery for himself. Now we're going to go to questions in a second, so if you haven't texted in already, then do. And whilst you're texting in, can I say, please pick up this little piece of paper. Can you do that? Whether or not you come to the Christian Union or not, it'd be great for everyone, okay, to pick that up. So can you just pick it up and wave it at me just to show you got it? Okay, there you go, you can whack yourself. It's that hot. Okay, you got it? Okay, great. Now pick up a pen and leave us some comments, okay? So you can just write these down and you can say, Gak was great, Michael wasn't, something like that. Tell us what you liked about the event, the food and everything else. It helps to know your comments. And you can all do that anonymously if you want. We'll hand these in at the end. But then there's 2 boxes there. The first one says, read more about it. After this week, we're going to have an opportunity for people to investigate and to ask questions and to look into the claims of Christianity and in particular Jesus for themselves in a really helpful and informal way. And we'd love you to come to that. So it'd be really good to make connection with you. So just tick the box that says read more about it, and leave us your name and leave us your mobile number. And then someone from the Christian Union will give you a ring over the next 24 hours and let you know about where it's going to be. Make sure that that's going to be convenient for you. If it's not, we'll sort something else out. If you want to meet up and chat, have coffee, ask your questions, that would be great. Okay? So just leave your phone number, your name, and tick the box. But everyone can leave some comments if you don't want to tick one of the boxes, okay? Don't worry about the other box for today, that's fine, okay? So take that. And also a really helpful way of investigating is to look firsthand at the person of Jesus. So these little books and accounts of Jesus' life written in the first century by someone who has investigated and talked to the eyewitnesses, a guy called Luke, a medical doctor and a historian. This book's really helpful and it's free and it's yours to take away. So as well as coming along to the events this week and the course that's going to happen next week, take this and have a read through it, and then come with your questions and talk to us about them and discuss further. Okay? Now great, we've got questions? Yep. So we'll go straight over to those, and we've got 10 minutes or so for that before we need to finish. Okay? But keep texting if you've not already.
Right, first question. Can all religions be equally wrong? Isn't atheism or maybe agnosticism be the best option?
In theory, of course, yes. Yeah, and actually one person said, well, in one sense, atheism is the most exclusive option of all, isn't it? It's saying all religions are all wrong. Because actually Christianity is not saying that all religions are all wrong. I think Gat was very helpful when he said that. He said becoming a Christian didn't mean that he disagreed now with all Buddhist philosophy. Actually, there are teachings and moral teachings in other religions that we want to agree with. Ideas that we would say, yes, we believe them too. Christianity is different in that it says, in Jesus we have a solution for the problem of our hearts, that we can't live up to that teaching. And we have the power to be able to do it through God's unseen self, the Holy Spirit. So there is something more than what we can get in anything else. Of course, atheism says, actually, no, none of those things are true, and none of those religions are right. There is no God. We live in a materialistic world. And in theory, that could be true, couldn't it? Which is why you need to investigate it. Now, it's very difficult, as people say, to prove a negative. But it is easier to start to look at whether there's evidence for a positive. And again, as I said in the first point of the second half of that talk, one of the ways where you can investigate Christianity is to look at the person of Jesus. If Jesus claims to be, and is shown to be who he claims to be, I should say, if he is shown to be who he claims to be, and the evidence stacks up, then actually that undermines the atheistic worldview, because it's saying actually there is something more than just this material world, and God has stepped into it. So you can actually start to investigate in that way, which I'd encourage you to do. And a helpful book on the bookstall is called Jesus for Skeptics. And that, if you're a skeptic about these things, is really helpful because you can start to look through that at the evidence for the person of Jesus, whether he really lived, the New Testament and the Gospels, and again the resurrection, as we'll do on Friday.
Next question. Surely if someone is sincere in their beliefs, even if they're wrong, shouldn't that be enough for a loving God?
It does seem unfair of God, doesn't it? You know, they're really, really sincere, they're just wrong, and so why should they be excluded? I guess on a philosophical level, you've got to say sincerity alone in other areas of life is rarely enough to sort out the problems if we're wrong. To give you a silly illustration, I could drink poison sincerely believing that it's grape juice, but it's still going to poison me. My sincerity doesn't help me, okay? That's on a philosophical level, but there's an emotional aspect to the question, isn't there? Which is, there are very nice, lovely religious people who don't seem to believe in Jesus, and how could God exclude them? I think at least a couple of things are worth bearing in mind. One, God is not trying to hide himself from us, but he longs to be found by us. He came in the person of Jesus. He wants us to investigate that, and he's given many, many of us the opportunity to do that. So he's not a God who's playing hide and seek. He's a God who's come looking for us, and we can know about him. And that would be what I'd say first, that we can investigate these things. And secondly, heaven is not simply the good place, whereas hell is the bad place. When the Bible talks about these things, and actually it talks not primarily about a place called heaven, but of new creation. We'll think about that on Friday as well. But when it talks about our hope as Christians, it's not just that we go to a nice place, but that we can live in relationship with the God who made us, a God who's revealed himself in Jesus. And therefore, if I choose to say to that God who's revealed himself in Jesus, God, I don't want you, I don't want to know you, then actually it's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Because heaven is not just a kind of neutral place where I just hang out with my mates. It is living in relationship with God, and God has shown himself through Jesus. And if I reject that God, and if I choose to reject Jesus, then that's really serious. Which is why, actually, we want to say, as a Christian Union, it's really serious to look into the claims of Christianity, because it is important what you believe, and it is important because it has implications. So I really encourage you to do that. And wonderfully, Christianity is open to all. We think, that means therefore that half the world is just stuffed. But actually, Gak didn't come to know Jesus in Glasgow, he came to know Jesus in Thailand. The places in the world where the Christian church is growing most rapidly today are Afghanistan and Iran. Not white, Western or middle class at all. So this is wonderfully open to all. And there are many, many from all sorts of cultures that are coming to investigate it. And of course, Christianity originally wasn't white, Western or middle class either. It's always traversed cultures and civilizations and powers. And it's often moved away from political power in the process, because it's about my heart relationship with God, not about my political affiliation to a certain nation or my identification in my nationality. Okay? Great question. Okay. Any more from the floor? I'm just conscious. We've got 5 minutes, so yes, there was one from the back.
I have a question. Instead of all those options you offered at the beginning, where you said all the legends can be true or false, whatever, what if there is another option? What if they're partially right? What if some parts of it are actually human? For example, you had the Bible only became available to Europe, to the rest of the world once printing became more available, because you had scribes back then, and not many people were aware of this. Before that happened, some of the principles taught in the Bible were quite human-like, because let's say Egyptians, Romans, they knew of these principles, they knew if they'd done something wrong, because there would be a negative response. So, who's to say that the principles in Christianity come directly from God and not only from human behaviour? For example, if you punch someone, you get a negative response, it helps. You know you shouldn't do that because you have affected the other person psychologically and physically. And you learn from that, and you pass it on. It's just something that passes on from generations.
Okay, great question. Can I try and answer it? So you're basically saying, could it be that all religions are partially right? So you're not saying that this one is completely right and this one isn't, particularly in terms of their principles and their moral teachings, and they may be kind of on a human level, learn kind of behaviour and stuff like that. And I guess you could add that in as an option, couldn't you? You could say, I think this part of this religion might be right, and this part might be right, but this part isn't. And sometimes that's what people like to do with Christianity. I like the kind of moral teaching, turn the other cheek sounds like a good principle, love your neighbour as yourself sounds like a good principle, but I don't like other parts. And I'd say, yes, that's an option, isn't it? Christianity historically, right from the first century, right through to today though, has always said that actually it's founded not just on a set of moral teachings, as we said earlier, but on the person of Jesus and who he claims to be, and whether Jesus or not is God. Now, it's difficult for that to be partially right, in the sense that he was like 20% God. As actually he either was who he claims to be and what the Bible claims him to be, or he wasn't. And if he wasn't, actually the problem with that is it means that the very foundation, the centre of the whole Christian message has really been based on a lie. So whether you or not you like the other, the moral teachings, actually Christianity itself, I should reject it really, because it's built on something that isn't really true. But of course, if it is true, then of course that changes things too. So I say in theory, it's absolutely an option, but when it comes to Christianity, it's not a question of do I like the teaching or not, because Christianity itself is based on the person of Jesus, and the big question is, what do I make of him when I look at the evidence for him, and who do I think he was, and what's my response going to be to him? Okay? But really good question. Yep. Sorry, I'll come back.
Basically, why not just pick different sides of religions and have a personal opinion on it? Make it your life's journey to become a better person. for example, the impact you have on Earth is much more important than the afterlife. So if you do naturally good things during your time here, why should you not be granted a place in the afterlife?
Yeah.
When you've probably been a better person and a more complete person, as you have all these different views from different religions you have learned, than other people who have followed strictly one religion and probably don't even follow it right.
Yeah. Okay, great question. So shouldn't we just make our effort to live as well as we can from whatever teachings we can find, rather than just thinking about an afterlife? And often that's what religion is trying to do, isn't it? It's trying to say this is how you should live. This is how you should try and be a better person. And the problem that Gat was sharing in his story, and actually I'd say would be the story, I think, of many of us, is to recognise that one of our problems is not that we don't know how to live. You know, I don't need the Bible to give me moral teaching. I also have a conscience. It's not just that I fail to keep what the Bible says. Actually, I fail to keep my own standards and my own conscience. I fail. And so what Jesus comes to say is that actually, I'm not just come to tell you how to live, but I've come to forgive you for when you don't live that way, because none of us can, no matter how hard we try. And I'm also coming by the power of my Spirit to help you live the way you should. So I'm going to come on board into your life. So I'm not just going to say, you know, here's how to swim, as it were, to use that illustration that Kat gave, but I'm going to dive in and rescue you, and then I'm going to help you and transform you. And so it doesn't mean that Christians don't say, well, because God's forgiven me, I can live as I like, because, you know, he's forgiven me, whatever. Actually, the experience of receiving God's forgiveness is one of the most transforming things. Christians believe that grace is the thing that is powerful to change us. You see that often enacted in other ways. You know, in the film Les Miserables, it's the experience of grace that's shown to Jean Valjean that transforms him. That forgiveness, not a moral code, but forgiveness. And the same thing in the Christian faith, we see that it's God's forgiveness for us in Jesus that is the very thing that can really change us. And I would say coming to know Jesus has transformed my life, and it is changing it, and will change it in the future too. But it really comes back to, again, the question about who Jesus was, and whether or not those claims are really true, to investigate those. Great questions, thank you. I'm just looking at the time, and we're pretty much out of time. So if you have more questions, it's not that we don't want to answer them. We'd love to do so. So we're not going to rush off. The guys are going to be staying, I'll be staying around. So do chat to us and talk, but maybe you need to rush off in a moment for lectures. So we will stop in a second. But thank you so much for your questions, and please continue to investigate. Tonight, I'm going to be speaking across the way, we'll hear the details in a moment, on the subject of life. Can't I just have fun? So do come along tonight, but we'll tell you all the details and a couple of other things now. Thank you.